All right, next game we're talking about is XCOM UFO Defense or UFO Enemy Unknown. It was nominated by @EVKTalo on Twitter. It was developed by Mythos Games. It was published by Microprose Software for the PC. Earliest known release date is March 1994 in Europe. Who here has something to say about XCOM?
I know someone who does.
Cal, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I love XCOM. What a fantastic game. It's an alien invasion simulator where you play as a secret shadow organization protecting the Earth from the alien invaders. And that doesn't that concept just, no matter what time period, that's cool, right? You just like, that's a cool idea, you know, it's a cool game. It's gonna be cool.
Unless you put it in the 1950s.
It's basically like Orson Welles' broadcast actually did happen, and now you have to deal with it.
But it's got like the big 90s shoulder pads and stuff, and
so much
Guile hair.
It's good. It's good 90s comic art because it's just before Grimdark took over. You know, it's like it's just like loud and poppy. It's not quite garbage. Anyway, I don't know. I think most people have probably actually heard of XCOM at this point, since it had a very successful, very well-regarded reboot, relaunch recently with the XCOM Enemy Unknown and XCOM Enemy Within and XCOM 2. I don't know what the subtitle for the sequel was.
I think it's just 2. Plain old 2.
Oh, okay. I love non-numerical number systems that don't make any,
Yeah, I mean,
okay.
The original series did get several sequels, but they didn't have any numbers. But we'll get to that later if we do.
If someone nominates them, which hopefully they won't, because they're not as good. Okay, so XCOM is a strategic game where you have a base that you put on a geoscape, which is a 3D representation of the Earth, and then you build a base full of the stuff that you would use to protect the Earth from aliens. And then you have a little radar system which detects aliens, and then you send out interceptor ships to stop aliens, and then you have a full tactical mode where you investigate alien ships, and later on you protect cities from aliens as well. And that's kind of, without going into the details of what the game is specifically, that's what you do. And it's a very, very large game, quite complicated, and with a lot of stuff to do. And it's pretty great. Did we say what year it came from? Because it's
yes, we did.
Pretty early on as far as games go, like, you know, early 90s. Really not actually that popular at the time. Didn't do that well in Europe. Did
in
really
America.
well in America. Yeah, it's weird.
PC Gamer was like all over this, and I remember it on the cover of one of those like kind of not that popular video game magazines, but you know they were all into this game.
Yeah, it's really cool. What I know a little bit of trivia for this. Basically, it didn't do all that well in Europe. Like, it was like people that played it liked it, but it wasn't popular. But then by the time it came out in the US, X-Files was out and really popular. And then
oh wow.
And by coincidence, XCOM was there, and it's like, hey, check it out, alien game. And people went nuts over the game because it was basically X-Files fever was at maximum peak, and XCOM was right there, and it was like, hey, we're like the game of that, but not.
Yeah,
I know it was also on the PS1. Did it do much better there?
I have no idea how the
imagine that it
PS1
did.
did.
Probably
one of the early ones. You know, in those long boxes. I don't think so, because I mean you would have to play with a controller and then deal with the memory card loading. Although they did do a port of the sequel, Terror from the Deep, that only came out in PAL territories.
Weird.
Which, as far as sequels go, is pretty. It's basically the exact same game with a palette swap.
It's way harder,
and it
right?
hates you. Yeah. Well, hates you more. I mean,
it's
that...
much harder. The aliens have a little bit more options to beat your ass, so it's not as fun. I think you can kill enemies by dumping them over the sea anymore, which was a big part of the first game to kind of stay alive. Yeah.
Unlike the X-Files, this game actually has a definitive ending to it. But it takes a while to get there. I mean, I almost want to say this is almost like a precursor or akin sort of to 4X type games, but not really. It's
not a precursor because it definitely came after like Civilization. But I was kind of thinking that myself before, because it's a game where expanding is kind of like the point, but it's not. you're not on equal ground with the aliens. Like your opponent is on completely different because they're just popping up all over the place, and you have to knock them down. So it has that sort of sense, but not in the same way.
Yeah, it's kind of like you've got it in that it's an asymmetrical sort of game in that you are on your own home ground. We're on Earth, and the aliens are showing up in limited numbers, but they're way more powerful than you. So you basically are fighting them, stealing their technology, researching it, which is a really cool thematic part of the game. You actually have to physically kill the aliens to get their technology, research it, and then you build like human equivalents of their weapons with their stolen like resources and stuff from ships that you've managed to destroy. Yeah, you're constantly playing chase up to the aliens, so whenever a new alien shows up, there's ones that can float, ones that are, made out of like flying discs and spinning things. You upgrade your human weapons to align with the new enemies that show up, which is like, that's cool.
Yeah, that's one of the key things about this game is that, like, you are always behind them. Like, the enemies they're not only more aggressive, but they always have better technology. And if you don't play catch up, then you're going to get, like, completely screwed and have to start the game over.
Yeah, that's something I'd like to talk about for just a little bit. This is not an easy game to get it into, and that's okay in part because of the theme. You're not meant to be really amazing, but it's like all your guys start as like these rookies who can't shoot for crap, and what you're mostly doing is trying to see how many survive the grinder to eventually get good enough to actually give the aliens a real fight, and that can take a while.
I do think that is part of the deliberate curve, though, the idea that, you're sending these complete rookies out like, good luck, guys. There's a bunch of aliens out there. I hope you do okay.
If you try to do you can't do the Fire Emblem thing where, like, you can potentially keep everybody alive. No, that's stupid. Your soldiers will perish. You do have to accept a degree of death. Like, I don't know, maybe you can try and keep like one or two alive and they become the commanders or whatever, but
yeah, usually that's what I would do. Is there'd be a couple people I just try to keep alive just because they've made it that far.
I mean, you can save scum to all ends of ages, but I tried that in one mission full of chrysalids and I just had to accept biting a giant chunk of death on that one.
Yeah, there's never a complete victory in this game.
True.
Like, you can do very well, but you'll just never do it perfectly. And that's what kind of, like, contrasts to the Japanese set of these type of games. Because, like, this is the first, like, strategy RPG game I had ever played back when I was, like, 12 or 13. Like, when I played Final Fantasy Tactics, I was like, okay, it's a combination of Final Fantasy and XCOM. But the fact that you can lose long-term is... Again, there's something closer to, like, the 4X part of it. Like, you really... I mean, unless you have a strategy guide, like, you have to, like, play and fail repeatedly to understand what you're supposed to do. And a lot of it is just, like, dumb mistakes. Like, I booted up for the first time and, like, I actually sit down and play it in probably, like, a decade or so. And, of course, like, I did pretty good on the first mission, but then I forgot to build a alien containment facility, so it died immediately. Oh. So there's just, like, lots of little stumbling blocks that you have to learn. Just for, like, simple little things.
What I like about a lot of that stuff is it makes sense. It's not like, oh, you didn't read the green thing. What? What was like, what? No, it's like, well, you want to keep an alien alive? You need an alien containment. That it's like, oh, well, obviously you need an alien containment to keep an alien alive.
Basically, read the manual or you're screwed.
I don't actually think this game demands that you read the manual because it's pretty good at telling you what's going on, except, and this is probably the biggest thing, the strategic interface controls will take some learning. That's probably the hardest part about the game to get used to. The time unit system, when you're using the guys in the tactics and you have like a dozen different symbols that don't tell you really what they do. And
that was I for the first time I tried that Open XCOM patch, and one of the best things about it is that it actually highlights like what that button is, because it's like a button of a dude standing with an arrow, which it means like next unit, but without that context or having the manual next to you, which was sort of like, especially Microprose games, they had really thick manuals. Like the XCOM one wasn't that bad, but it definitely presupposed that you had it next to you, at least when you were starting to play the game.
Yeah, like I don't consider it a huge deal because it's trying to make this game kind of intuitive and simple to play, especially once you've played it a little bit. Like you're like, oh yeah, no, the The interface makes sense, and I really like some of the features. Like you have the ability to lock a turn unit so that you can say, okay, I want to move, but don't let me move more than I can move and shoot, because I want to shoot after I move, so I don't care. And so it's got that option to move and shoot without accidentally, without having to time your own steps. It has that built in.
Oh, well, the biggest thing about that is, I don't know if this is the game that defined it, but the Overwatch, the idea that, like, you would set your character with enough units left so that if it saw an enemy, it would automatically shoot.
Yeah, which is a huge part of, kind of.
Yeah, you need to use this a lot, and I never saw too many Japanese games that used it up until I played, like, Valkyria Chronicles, like 15 years later.
Yeah, it wasn't popular, I think, but a lot of Japanese games, to be fair, they don't often do the bunch of dudes with guns, which makes it a lot harder to do a sort of Overwatch mode, whereas XCOM, everyone's got guns. And what I love about that is, you have, like, 16 guys, whatever, you usually have less than that until later on in the game, but, you'll march them all out, and then you actually have to sort of cover yourself, like, you have to have them overwatching each other and keeping an eye on all of the potential areas of ingress. And usually that's your only advantage, is you actually outnumber the aliens, especially early on, where, you're only dealing with like 3 or 4, maybe 5 sectoids. So you actually have the ability to take them out, like one by one, sort of pick them off, even if your guys are not great at shooting. But it also made the game terrifying to play, because, if you're playing, especially if you everyone regrets doing this, but if you engage in the aliens at night and you can barely see anything, and your guys are walking through, like, it's so thematic. Is like, if you're walking through cornfields and then there's an alien who's set to Overwatch and you're just walking, and then you just hear this like snap, and then the alien plasma rifle goes off, and you're just like, oh shit, and bam, your rookie just
You really do have to be kind of paranoid, because the enemies typically can shoot way better than you can. Like, I've had times I just walk off the ship you start on, and just there's a shot, and the guy is just dead.
Yeah.
So you have to be really, really careful where you're going, and make sure you do not waste any movement.
Yeah, one of those rookie mistakes is when, like, you don't take all of your guys off the ship at the beginning, and then some alien chucks a grenade in and just blows them all away immediately.
Oh, that's the worst.
Yeah,
man. Yep.
There really is a good deal to learn with this game, but you still have to accept veritable probability of failure nonetheless. I mean, this game's really infamous for, like, having an alien basically dead to rights, point blank, and you could still miss a goddamn pistol shot somehow.
The pistol's not super accurate. As far as the guns go.
Yeah, you'll definitely want to upgrade to rifles and cannons later on as you get them. But while this game is still pretty harsh, I want to say, in comparison to other games of this make, it's still kind of forgiving. I mean, like, what else can we compare it to that's even harder than this?
Well, I do like to think of this game, at least partially, as a roguelike. To say in terms of difficulty. Because it has that element of, because there's a lot of randomness in this game, especially, the areas are randomly generated, where the aliens come from is randomly generated, like they'll just appear in different areas. It doesn't, every time it's different. Where the Terra missions start, it's different. You don't know, so there's always this element of, I don't know what's going on, but you do get the tech tree remains the same, it remains static, but it does have this ability to tell an organic story around a linear framework, which I think is really cool.
True. We got to rank this thing pretty soon. But before we do, I wondered if anybody could talk a little bit more about, like, the weird sort of, like, economic part of it, where, like, you have to get funding.
Yeah, I was about to mention that your greatest enemy isn't so much the aliens as it is money. And not just money and bureaucracy, as a matter of fact.
Real quick, like, your biggest problem in this game is you kind of have a downward spiral going on. Like, your thing is you have to protect all the countries of the world from alien attack, and if you can't do that, they don't trust you anymore, and they start giving you money, which means you're just going to be worse at protecting everybody else, so they start giving you money, and it just kind of builds up, is a problem.
Yeah, which is great. I love that. It's such a human thing to do.
So crazy, though. It's like you're mankind's last hope, Earth is being invaded by a much more powerful force of aliens, and if you mess up, people are like, I don't know, maybe we should just like stop giving them money and just like give up. Yeah, no, you give them more money. If they start losing, you really
no. I think the idea is that they abandoned the XCOM project and are like, no, we're just going to invest in our own military. They'll deal with it, rather than give money to you. I think is the sort of the context of it.
I'm just wondering why the concept of an economy matters when the actual apocalypse is at stake.
I don't want to get political on you here.
Oh,
but
Jesus!
We have a really...
Please don't.
No, I'm not going to go political. Just humans have a really bad history of being like, serious problem. Cost money? Oh, I don't think so.
Think of any RPG where you're going to face the end of the world and people are still charging you money for anything.
Yeah, I'm sorry to bring up TV tropes, but I think the colloquialism for this is Adam Smith hates your guts.
And plus you're talking about people's taxes, basically, so you know how people are with tax dollars.
They might be like, I don't know, maybe the alien taxes will be lower, so we should take a chance on that.
Yeah, I guess compared to, like, Final Fantasy VII's last disc, where the meteor is hanging in the sky perpetually, and you still have to, pay this much for the gold saucer or whatever, I guess XCOM at least does a better job of justifying the catch of budget. But still,
wouldn't it be an interesting difficulty, like ameliorating mechanism if you did get by losing, you would get like a brief funding boost by people like, oh crap, like we're gonna lose everything, like we better give them a little bit of extra cash.
I'm glad you sort of
kind of help
that.
You climb back up a little bit.
Because I can bring up, there was an early mechanism in this game which led to one of the infamous DOS bugs, or the main infamous DOS bug. This game has a bug where if you play the game, the original very DOS version, what'll happen is after the first fight, it'll automatically go back to easy mode. No matter what you picked, it'll bounce back to easy mode. And the thing is, originally the game was going to have a dynamic difficulty. So after fights and things, it was going to look at it and go, okay, you didn't do well, so we're going to make the game easier. You did well, so we're going to make the game harder. So there was kind of an intent, actually, to do a very similar system to that, where it was actually going to try and make it a little bit less crushing when you were doing badly. They stripped it out and didn't end up going with it. But there's a little tidbit.
I remember this because people were complaining about how UFO defense was easy, so as a result, they made just the base difficulty in Terror from the Deep ungodly excruciating, and then anything above that is impossible to super impossible. So fantastic! That's
Does OpenXCOM fix that issue? Because I think that's the best way to play this game.
There's an option for it.
Fan patches. OpenXCOM, I presume, fixes it. Most of the later releases fix it. It's only the original DOS version, and I believe for ages the Steam version and maybe the GOG version, because they were just emulated original DOS releases, had that issue. But
I just read about that for the first time when I booted up the OpenXCOM, and the version I played was actually like the European version on CD because I had bought it at a computer show, which is where I got all my old games back then, and I still remember it being excruciatingly hard.
Yeah,
so that was been a later version.
The version that they had actually fixed.
Yeah,
because I think they did fix later releases because someone pointed it out. On the subject of the money, though, you can also sell your alien equipment and stuff on the black market, which is really fun. The idea that it's just, well, we're not being funded by the government, so let's sell extremely dangerous alien weaponry to just random people on the black market because that'll go well.
Surely there's some narco gangs out there that want some of these plasma rifles or whatever.
That's basically what I did to shore up my cash early on in the game, because, you don't need that many laser pistols, just pawn it off.
Yeah, this can't possibly backfire. All right, where do we want to rank this? Where do we want to rank it?
Well, it's already been sort of made aware before this where I want to rank it, which is I really want this game to go very, 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 very high. But I don't know about everyone else, even though it seems like everyone here at least likes the game, I think.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I think it is really a fantastic game, but you were pushing for number one. I don't know about
I don't know about that either.
For number one.
I certainly don't hate it.
I like the game, but I feel like it does get kind of tedious.
I do have to admit, like, late in the game, I actually did beat this one. Late in, where I felt that just battling would have been a time waster while waiting for research for my final spaceship. I literally just kept skipping time ahead, and, like, England severed its funding with me, but I still managed to go to space and destroy the final mission, so... But yeah, there is a certain repetition that comes in, like... It is hard, but after you step over that learning curve and you know more or less what to do, then, it just sort of regulates. I mean, it's still enjoyable, but, once you just basically have everything set in place, it's only a matter of time and money until you do get everything you need.
Right. I mean, the reason why I say this is just that, like, in other pure 4X game, right, the gameplay always gets different as you go on. Like, the obstacles are different. Like, different things can start to happen. Usually there's, like, one other super powerful force out there that you have to kind of start worrying about. And, you know what I mean? Whereas this game, I maybe I'm wrong, but as I recall, when we played it for the previous version of the podcast, I felt like it kind of didn't really, it just got harder and bigger, but not really, it was cool to see.
There's quite a curve of enemies that will show up as the game progresses. You don't start at maximum tier enemies. You start with the little sectoids. You start to get mutants or whatever. You get crystallids who just wreck everyone's day, and everyone's terrified of them pretty much constantly.
And then you get the different weapons, like the psychic stuff.
Yeah, you get different weapons, which is really cool. You actually start, like, the aliens have the ability to mind control you. I always forget the name, but
the Ethereals. The Ethereals. Those guys are cheaters.
Yes. They're not actually ethereal, but they're called Ethereals, so I don't know.
Well, the Chrysalids and the Ethereals are gigantic jerks, so I forgot to mention that earlier, but...
Okay.
Yeah, so they can actually mind control your guys, and your guys can actually panic, which is really cool. I don't know if this is one of the first games where your soldiers actually can freak out, like, if they see a person die, they're like, oh god, everything's going to hell, and their morale will actually collapse, and then they'll just go crazy, which is...
Yeah, I feel like there were some other games around this time, but I don't know of any that I definitely predate XCOM.
So, really quickly at the Laser Squad and all the other Julian Gollop games before this, it looks like there was a morale meter, so I'm assuming...
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised since Julian Gollop brought a lot of the game that he was previously making, because this is actually going to be Laser Squad 2 until it was sort of rejiggered into ultimately what it was.
The biggest thing XCOM has over Laser Squad is the idea of progression and the global map and having to slowly build yourself up instead of just being stuck in single missions.
Which I think is a really key part to this game. Like so many other games, a single mission based, and before and after. And XCOM, and this is one of the reasons I think it's so great, is it has this massive overarching strategic thing, and it has individual tactical levels, and it has, base building, economic systems, and it fits, you have every single bit, and you put them together, and it's like, that actually works. You don't go, this bit's unnecessary or that bit's crap. No, it's like, actually, every bit here comes together really well, and you make smart choices in one map, and that will influence your other map. If you sell off your weapons to keep the project going, you're going to have less equipment later. Maybe that'll screw you then. If you decide not to do a terror mission because you can't, you're like, whoa, I don't want to lose all my guys. So then they'll leave the XCOM project. If you shoot an alien mothership or an alien ship down over the ocean, it just disappears. So you can strategically think about whether you down a ship over land or in the ocean. How you lay out your base comes back to bite you in the ass as the game progresses. Like, even all this stuff comes together. And why I think that it's such a phenomenal game, and compared to especially games on the list, a lot of these games, and we have them, where they're like, it's a simple idea done really well, and it's like, cool, it is. This game is a complex idea done really well. And it can have like little rough edges and things in places, but it's really, really, really hard to make a game this functional and this expansive. My evidence for that is, you can look at games after XCOM, and you can probably pull maybe half a dozen that do XCOM as well as XCOM from when this game came out to today. There's very, very few games that can handle that many systems at once.
So what you're saying is like in the you're putting it in what, the Donkey Kong Country 3 range? Is that what we're?
I actually thought it was a little better than Donkey Kong Country 3 because that's a third sequel to two superior games.
Let's not be hyperbolic here. I know Cal definitely wants to rate it high. I think it should
you guys
go
don't have
very
to rate
high,
it high on my account, but I
no,
do think
we
it's a
definitely won't.
game.
Don't worry about that.
I'm thinking somewhere in FTL. What do you guys think?
That sounds fair. I would have put it a little bit higher than that. Like I
would
like,
put. I mean, I've never played FTL, but I mean, I would definitely put this in like top 12.
You've got to play FTL.
FTL is actually worth playing.
Actually, it's a pretty comparable game in a lot of ways. Of just like the amount of stuff that you can do.
And that's
much more streamlined.
That was a little something that I wanted to talk about. I'll only say it for a few seconds, but just XCOM is one of those games that I think really subtly influenced a hell of a lot of gamers and a hell of a lot of developers because it regularly shows up on like indie developers like top lists and like game reviewers top lists. This game is always there, you know. XCOM's sitting in there like, oh, XCOM was so good, and it's kind of like XCOM and Star Control 2, you know, these kind of games where it's just like those games were just so great on the PC. You know, these were the columns, the pillars of like, this is what PC gaming can do. This is what, if you got a PC, this is the game you're after, you know, like, yeah, this is the peak of games that can be like very system mechanics, tactics heavy, and it's not like an arcade game.
We really got to wrap this up. So let me just point something out here. Like pretty much wherever we put this, if it's in the top 15 or more, or actually even in the top 20, it would be the most complicated game. There's no game that's this complex that's anywhere near.
The only game on our list that I think comes close so far at a high level is Devil May Cry because it has a lot of complicated.
I was going to say more like Metal Gear Solid.
Interesting.
Metal Gear Solid's not that complicated. It's a very, to me, I wouldn't call it complicated. I would just call it like a, you know, very,
it's got a lot of shit going on,
highly produced game, but it's not super complicated. I mean, you're not doing anything that different by the end of the game than what you started out doing. Devil May Cry is maybe a better comparison, but still, that's not. I think this, like, XCOM is just worlds away in terms of just how much stuff is happening.
So, did you want to place it between Lode Runner and Devil May Cry then?
I'm not saying that that's like a reason to rank it high or low. I'm just saying that pretty much wherever you put it, it's like it's going to be the most complex game. And one of my personal criteria for rank, like there are a lot of games that I really like that are so complicated I don't even feel like I fully understand them, and I'm hesitant to rank them all that highly. This is one of them, and I kind of I'm kind of partial to simpler, more elegant things, and this is definitely the opposite of that.
True.
But I don't dislike. That's just my personal opinion. I think from I would put it somewhere around.
I think especially at another point, as you know, I did say there's a new XCOM, and in a lot of ways, the new XCOM, very, very little difference between it and the original game. Like, you're talking a game that was made like 2 decades plus ago, and you're like, okay, well, we just took it and we gave it a new coat of paint and added some stuff.
So I can live with below Lode Runner, above Devil May Cry. Anybody else?
That works for me.
I would stick it above Lode Runner, but that's about it.
Lode Runner.
Yes, above Lode Runner.
Uh-oh. Well, I'm okay with
coughing.
I'm okay with whatever. I'll provide the tiebreaker, but between MGS and LRO, as it were, what does anyone say?
That's not a tiebreaker. That's a tie maker.
No. I mean,
if he goes up above Lode Runner, then it's 3 for above Lode Runner.
Yeah, I don't know what I'm suggesting. I don't know which one I want to go for. I want to hear what everyone else thinks about placing it below Metal Gear Solid.
Look, I'm willing to say, like, you know, it's not, even though I think it's subtly influenced a lot, I don't think it's a game that defined gaming as a whole. It's just a really, really damn good game that influenced a lot of developers to get into developing. And it is timeless, I think. It's a fantastic game.
Okay, so...
What? The last thing I could say about it is that they tried to do so many sequels to this game, and none of them really came close to it until the reboot, which was almost 20 years later.
All right. So between Lode Runner and DMC, then?
All right.
No, between Metal Gear Solid and Lode Runner, right?
Yeah. Agreed.
So where are we placing it? You guys are confusing me.
Between Metal Gear and Lode Runner.
Okay. Let's do it.
Okay,
Go on the list. You can't stop me now.
It gets bumped up one. All right, fair enough. XCOM UFO Defense is our 7th greatest game of all time. I'll be damned.